Back now with our panel. Kimberly Strassel is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Peter Baker is White House correspondent for the New York Times. And last night, he won the Aldo Beckman Award for distinguished reporting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Congratulations to you, Peter. Aldo Beckman was a friend of mine. And
that's good to hear.
He's a great guy. Ruth Marcus, columnist for the Washington Post, and CBS News political director John Dickerson here, getting used to getting up every Sunday morning, even the Sunday morning after the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The truth of the matter is I may still be at the White House. I'm not quite sure where I am this morning, but it's an amazing evening. I'm in a town that generally goes to bed at 9 o'clock if people stay out past midnight. Ruth, just as you were sitting down here, you told me something that I never knew. You went to school with Evan Wolfson, who's heading up the Right to Marry
I did, and when Evan, we went to college and law school together, and in law school he wrote his third-year paper, as was required, on the then fanciful and outlandish subject of whether there was a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. This was viewed as so out there that it was hard for him to find a faculty advisor, he told me later. And now I think you mentioned how difficult and dangerous it is to predict things. How amazing is it that many, many years later, I think we're not even that much on tenterhooks about what the Supreme Court's going to do. It seems almost inevitable.
Will this still be an issue in the campaign in 2016?
Well, it depends on what the ruling is. Let's talk about it on the Republican side, where it's complex. You have all of the Republican candidates running for president would like the Supreme Court to uphold these state bans on same-sex marriage. That's what they've said, both as a matter of their own faith and also as a matter of the way they see the Constitution. I think politically speaking, purely politically for Republicans, there's a challenge. On the one hand, they have the party, some believe, has an image problem, and that support or at least openness to same-sex marriage is a part of the wave of the future, and the party needs to be somehow associated with that. Particularly young Republicans are very much in favor of same-sex marriage. Not older Republicans, but younger Republicans, and that's the future. The tension, of course, though, is there is a group of people in the Republican Party for whom this is a faith question, and this is a sincere, as you mentioned, matter of their belief. And it's not just about redefining marriage, as they put it, but it's about the values that are being destroyed by the culture. And that's a group that Republicans are trying to talk to as they make their case for the presidency. So that's where it'll be interesting to see how that tension plays out.
You know, Kim, so many of these would-be Republican candidates, they're really dancing around this issue, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, but they are. Those who say that, well, I'm against same-sex marriage, but the question of the month has been, but would you go to a gay marriage? That's kind of seems to be the threshold question now.
Well, that question is sort of strange to me because it just seems to be restating the question of, are you in favor of gay marriage? This tension that John mentions is not necessarily new. I mean, you've always had these different factions within the Republican Party. Those are defense hawks, those who are, fiscal conservatives, those are social conservatives, and you have these splits. So I think one of the interesting things here is, how is the court going to rule? They're going to want very much for it to be a states' rights question. And I don't think, by the way, that is still out of the realm of possibility. People are talking about Anthony Kennedy being the final deciding vote on this, and he has been very sympathetic to gay marriage in past decisions, but he's also a big fan of states' rights. And there are two questions that the court is looking at. One is there a constitutional right to this? But the second one is there the 14th Amendment, does it require states to recognize gay marriages from out of states? And there is a scenario you could see in which they ruled no in the first question and yes in the second.
I think this is going to be something, no matter what the court rules, we'll be talking about it just in the same way that we talk about a woman's right to choose and all of that. There's just a divide here, and there are sincere people. Truly,
I don't think it's going to be the same roiling and really tearing apart society question that abortion has been since Roe v. Wade. There are sincere differences on both of those issues, but society remains incredibly split on the right to abortion. I think for the reasons that John mentioned, because the demographics are in favor of same-sex marriage, it is not going to be as societally split. But you also have to ask the question, though. I think maybe one of the reasons that this has played out better is because the courts have not been as aggressively involved, and the states were making their own. You keep
pointing out to those polls, America's got to that position on its own, largely. And I think there is an issue about whether or not, if the court does impose something here, you do end up in another Roe v. Wade situation, and it polarizes the situation.
Although it's interesting, the court actually set this up in an interesting way. 2 years ago, it sort of gave a half decision that then gave license to all these lower courts to decide that same-sex marriage had to be allowed over the voters who had passed these bans in their state constitution. So 30-some states now have same-sex marriage, but not because of the action of democracy, not through legislative actions, but through lower courts that took their cue from the Supreme Court. And now, in effect, the Supreme Court has set it up so that if they decide to, they're coming back and ratifying a decision that they made 2 years ago that was then interpreted by lower courts.
And without a huge societal backlash.
And without a big, huge backlash, but some backlash.
I wanted to just suggest 2 questions in addition to the would you go to a same-sex wedding question for candidates. And one is the Republican Party platform in 2012 endorses a constitutional ban on same-sex marriage. Is that the view of Republican candidates today? Number 2, there are no job discrimination or housing discrimination protections in federal law on the basis of sexual orientation. Do you think that that's fair in 2016?
Let me just shift. An excellent discussion on that.